Hello. Once again, we are reviewing with our friend Swami Rama lectures on yoga. This section is on pranayama. Remember, it's the 8 rungs, traditional Ashtanga, Ashta, 8 Anga rungs, the 8 rungs of yoga as outlined by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras. This section here is a little bit to talk about for another reason, a different reason than the asana section. Here is that some of this outlines some of the more complex, difficult. I'm not fond of advanced, but anyway, they're almost impossible to talk about by reading words or by just giving narration. They really can be pretty much only learned in person, where you can be personally together physically. But we'll do the best we can. There's some good stuff in here. This is pranayama. There is pranayama there. When a student starts practicing postures accurately, he becomes more aware of variations in the flow of his breath. And then the teacher can begin to give him various techniques of breathing exercises or pranayama. Note the sequence there that's in the sentence he says there. Once the person has made some progress in the posture, and mostly we're dealing with preparation postures to be able to do the seated posture for meditation, which is where we're headed with this process. And once one can do that, then one is ready to be given the various techniques of breathing exercises or pranayama. We're just stuck with that. It's an awkward thing. We're stuck with the fact that we have to learn systematically. Sometimes when we're reviewing this systematic process, we're essentially going through the whole thing, and that's what one book does. But you're going through the whole process, discussing it, but then we have to learn it a step at a time. And sorry to say, we have to practice it a step at a time so that we are ready to do that next step. And this pranayama is very much something like that. The meaning of the word pranayama may be explained in 2 ways. Prana is energy or the life force, and yama means the control of that energy. Or the word pranayama may be divided into prana and ayama. In this case, ayama means expansion or rising. So pranayama may be understood as the practice whereby the flow of prana is made more extensive and expansive, as well as being brought under control. The word prana is composed of 2 words, pra and na. Pra means first unit and na means energy. This first unit business, in terms of our friendly circle chart, commonly pranayama is thought of as being here with breath, because we start by working with the mechanical muscles of breath and the lungs and all. But eventually we come to see that the prana is actually back here. The first manifestation out of Atman is prana. And this prana operates out all the way through all the levels of our being. Anyway, so that's kind of what he's leading to there. It's the pra means first unit, na means energy, sometimes called adi. Adi means first. So adi prana is the first prana. This first unit of energy is in its subtlest aspect in man. The universe is its expansion. Thus, there is no qualitative difference between man and the universe, made in the same way. In the Western Bible, it says, there's a sentence in there somewhere that says, man is made in the image of God. And so it's a comparable sort of comment, that the way that we humans are manifested outward is comparable to the way the universe is manifested outward. The underlying principle in both is prana, and prana is the sum total of all energy that is manifest in man and in the universe. In the beginning, there was akasha or space, and through prana, the universe was manifest. All that is present in the world of sense perception is only an expression and manifestation of this vital energy. It is prana that feeds and sustains the mind and produces thoughts. It is therefore related to the mind, through the mind to the will, through will to the individual Atman, and thus to the cosmic soul, Brahman. All sensations, all thinking, feeling, and knowing are possible only because of prana. There is Matri and Inika. Hello. And there's Rosalind. Hello, Rosalind. Hello, Matesh. The science of breath is an important part of the science of pranayama. Note the words. Science of breath is a part of pranayama, but the world has not yet recognized this important aspect of life. Yogis alone know the secret of this science, for the subject is vast and recondite. There's a fancy word for you. Many talk of physical health. Others talk of the soul, the universe, and God. But the real mystery of prana remains veiled, even though it is prana which sustains the body, and without its help, body and mind could not exist. Brings to mind a very, very important point about this prana business. If we want to understand prana, this is true, as you know, of all of the things that we keep doing, but it's particularly true with prana. You cannot understand prana by reading books and lectures. We just simply cannot understand prana. We must explore within and feel the various energies, the vayus. We must feel these pranas flowing internally. We have to be curious. We have to want to sit. We have to want to lay down and feel that energy flowing here, there, and everywhere. I'm sorry to say it, there's just simply no escaping that. We must run the experiments ourselves. Hi, Scott. Hi, Roseanne. I don't mean that to be a critic, but we can get so involved in saying, I want to do meditation, and oh yes, I'm already breathing, so therefore let me just plop my butt down and breathe a little, and then I'm going to do meditation. And then we wonder, why is my meditation not deepening? And in large degree, because often we're not even attaining the state of meditation because we're stuck a few steps back. This is one of the beautiful things about the way Patanjali has lined out these stages of practice. If you're not in samadhi, go back a step and see what you missed. You say, well, I'm not in samadhi. Well, what's wrong with my meditation? Oh, well, wait a minute. Oops, I'm not even doing meditation. Oh, what's before that? Concentration. Well, am I getting concentrated? I'm still having difficulty concentrating. What's the key to that? Step before that is pratyahara. Oh, I'm not really withdrawing my senses, we come to see. I'm really not withdrawing my senses because I've been at this for years and I'm still sitting here and my mind is jabbering. Those are the indriyas. And I'm still thinking about this and daily problems and all that. What's wrong? Well, go back one step and what do you find? You find pranayama. And that's where we are. And I'm saying this just to put this emphasis, this preliminary part of what Swamiji is explaining here in this chapter. This is really the key. This is the important part here. Hello, Ramanas. So anyway, modern science has done much research on diet, calories, vitamins, and minerals. The mind and its functions are also being studied. The breath links the body and the mind, and very little research has been done on the science of breath. There are many books on philosophy and religion, but few books deal with pranayama because it must be known experientially, and only one who has mastered its practices can explain it thoroughly. We simply must do it. All the books on philosophy and religion and all that stuff, we have to work with the breath. Prana sustains life. It enters the body through food we eat and the air we breathe. The vital part of food is prana, without which none can live, even for a few minutes. But food contains a grosser quality of prana than does the breath, which carries it in a more subtle form. Now, from what I've seen, most, if not virtually all of modern science completely ignores what he just said there because they don't believe that prana exists. It was set aside a couple hundred years ago. This notion of there being such a thing as vital energy, the scientists literally decided there is no such thing, and that it just appears to be there. It's just a manifestation of matter. Anyway. Hi, Johnny. There is no medicine known to man which can substitute for this vital energy which we absorb through our food and breath. It is important to remember, though, that prana is not the air we breathe or the food we eat. They are merely vehicles. So just as man takes in food, vitamins, proteins, and calories, so he should learn and practice the most important and vital exercise of filling his lungs completely at least twice a day. Before I go on here, let me make another mention here. He mentioned food. This is, yogically speaking, a very important part of the habit of eating whole food, whole, fresh, living food, rather than all the processed junk food that many of us get caught into eating. There's something to it. There's a life force in it. Whole foods, not processed. So just as man takes in food, vitamins, proteins, and calories, so he should learn and practice the most important and vital exercise of filling his lungs completely at least twice a day. Regulating the lungs is the most vital process in cleansing the human system. When our lungs go into action, an exchange takes place between the vital prana that is being consumed and that prana which has already been consumed. Overeating or eating overcooked food disrupts this exchange, and both the lungs and the entire respiratory system become irregular. Even the pores suffer. When one regulates the motion of the lungs by certain breathing exercises, however, the pores function properly and the tissues and cells become healthy. The lungs are situated on each side of the chest, with the heart, the great blood vessels, and the esophagus separating them, and the air passages leading to them. At the base of the lungs, we find the diaphragm, the muscular wall dividing the chest cavity from the abdomen, and it is the action of the diaphragm which draws air into the lungs. The diaphragm contracts, causing the lungs to expand, and creates a partial vacuum into which the air rushes. When the diaphragm relaxes, the lungs contract and the air is expelled. Maybe I'll make another little video later on the diaphragm. It's so important. So control of the diaphragm is the first step. first step in the practice of breathing exercises. And it's one that is, as most of us know, very easy to overlook or to lose sight of over time. The simple practice of deep breathing with diaphragmatic movement is the foundation for the science of breath. Very, very strong sentence. The air we inhale helps all the systems in our body to conduct their respective functions, and in controlling the motion of our lungs, we are regulating the exchange in the storehouse of vital energies. Furthermore, by controlling the motion of the lungs, highly accomplished yogas can control the autonomic nervous system and its set of muscles. The functioning of prana is the basic principle underlying the systolic and diastolic actions of the heart. The exhalation and inhalation of the lungs, the digestion of food, the excretion of urine and fecal matter, and the manufacture of gastric juice, bile, intestinal fluid, and saliva. Kind of important, isn't it? By controlling the motion of the lungs, one can also control the functioning of the pores, which is necessary in cleansing the whole body. The yoga manual called Tarangini explains such a method of cleansing called the prana bath. In order to do this, one pushes in the diaphragm, expelling the carbon dioxide and carbonic acid without inhaling for some time. This is done repeatedly according to the capacity of the lungs, but it should be practiced only under the guidance of a competent and accomplished teacher. The student needs to be skilled in the preliminary steps of pranayama. When practiced by advanced students, the prana bath is one of the most effective cleansing techniques known and is highly regarded by the yogis dwelling in the Himalayan mountains. Swami Rama, I don't know if he says it here, but elsewhere he has said that this is something that is learned, especially by the yogis who are living without showers and bathtubs, in the caves. And so they learn to do this with the prana. It's not something that you and I need to learn, but it's fascinating, isn't it? You can play with it. I've played with it. I'm no master at it. I do a pretty good job with diaphragmatic breathing and Sushumna awakening. That's the important thing. Remember, the important thing of all of this has to do with the Sushumna awakening and balancing. It all comes down to that. Through knowledge of the breathing system, one can control all of the motions of the body and the mind. Through the practice of pranayama, one can shape one's character and even change the course of one's life. For the knowledge of breath behavior is a very subtle and complete knowledge of the functioning of the mind and body. This is hard to believe, but this simple breathing practice of regulating the lungs so that we're working with the diaphragm and having this positive effect on the prana has a tremendous, tremendous effect on the noisy problems that we are experiencing in the mind, whether it's just day-to-day stress in the mind, or clinically diagnosed, crap that's going on in our mental and emotional life. Tremendously, tremendously useful. But we have to practice. For the knowledge of breath behavior is very subtle and complete knowledge of the functioning of the mind and body. A number of diseases ordinarily thought to be incurable can be helped through the practice of pranayama. For prana links the physical and mental life. There's the key, is remembering that prana links the body and the mind. I know you know this, it's not new information, but here it is. It's that breath thing that's sitting there right in the middle between the body. It's in the picture. It's between the body and the mind, and there it is. And this really, really, really is true. I know that this is not new information for you, but I'm emphasizing it here because this is what we're talking about now, and it really, 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 really is true. So inventory yourself, double check yourself. Are you really, really spending time every day just simply breathing, sitting and breathing with the diaphragm and getting that diaphragm to contract and pull the lungs down and bring air in and release? Are you doing that? Are you laying on your back, just breathing and allowing the diaphragm to cause the breathing to occur and feeling that tremendous life force flow through your body? Double check it yourself. Yet you're the only one that can do it. We each one individually are the only one ultimately that can assess whether or not we're doing it. If I'm with somebody trying to help them with their breathing, I can only say so much to the person about the nature of their bad breathing habits because it comes across as insulting. So if you're somebody in my side and trying to coach somebody in doing this breathing, I've actually had this happen. I'm remembering now someone who I love dearly and finally quit doing these practices completely because of not being able to gently train the breath to just be smooth. And it's, from my side, it's heartbreaking to watch this happen because it really, really is. There's a simplicity to it, and it's key, and it's sitting there right in the middle between the body and the mind. Very, very useful. I've found the diaphragmatic cycle breathing to be extremely useful, particularly while using both nostrils. Of course, using both nostrils. That's what the key is. That is the key. Not particularly, but only when using both nostrils, if I may add and say it like that. I chopped that off maybe a little bit too quick. Give everybody a chance to read it a little bit more. It is said a number of diseases ordinarily thought to be incurable can be helped by the use of practices of pranayama, for prana links physical and mental life. When this link is broken, what happens? Death takes place. That's what he says here. It is said by the ancient sages, one who knows the science of breathing knows everything, and he who knows prana knows the Vedas. Quite a comment, isn't it? For this very reason, breath is Brahman. Whatever moves or works or has life is but an expression or manifestation of prana. It is prana that moves the mind, and through the mind, it moves the will. Prana is related through the will to the individual soul, and in turn to the Supreme Being, the cosmic soul. In order to understand the science of pranayama, it is necessary to consider the nature and functions of the nervous system, which coordinates the functions of all the other systems in the body. It may be subdivided into the central nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The central nervous system, also called the cerebrospinal system, consists of the brain, 12 pairs of cranial nerves, the spinal cord, and 31 pairs of spinal nerves. The spinal cord, situated in the hollow of the spinal column, is a prolongation of the brain. The cranial nerves from the brain and the spinal nerves from the spinal cord spread throughout the body, forming a network of nerve fibers which are either efferent or afferent. Efferent fibers carry nerve impulses from the brain and spinal cord outward to the nerve endings, while the afferent nerve fibers carry nerve impulses from the nerve endings inward to the brain and spinal cord. The autonomic nervous system regulates processes in our body which are not normally under our voluntary control. Processes such as the secretions of the digestive organs, the beating of the heart, and the movement of the lungs. The autonomic nervous system is further subdivided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. As the names suggest, these two systems work in opposition to each other and complement one another. In this way, they maintain balance. That's the key for us. It's practical and down to earth. For example, the parasympathetic system operates to slow down the action of the heart, while the sympathetic system accelerates the action of the heart. And those ought to be running in balance. The regulation of heartbeat results from these two opposing actions. Swami Rama did a thing. He was talking about here about learning how to do this in autonomic nervous systems, these various systems. They did some research on him in a research lab in the U.S. in around 1970 it was. And they asked him one day, can you demonstrate for us the control of your heartbeat? And he said, can you make your heart stop beating? And he said, yes, of course. I'll do it for you tomorrow. And I have this, this is somewhere on my website. I have a PDF file that has part of the research from a book describing this experiment that was done with him. It has a graph of a needle on a little paper. They didn't have computers at the time, a little rolling paper and a little needle that's measuring heartbeat on there. And they did not ask him to do a particular method, an approach. They just asked him if he could do it. He said, yes, I'll demonstrate it for you tomorrow. And so the next day they hooked him up to the machines, and the thing was measuring his heartbeat. And what he did is he didn't do anything. Now, he didn't go running around like you and I would think. Oh, that's what you do to build your heart rate up. You have to do some exercise and then the heart rate will go up. That's not what he did. He's just laying there. And internally, because of the regulation of prana, I'm not saying this so that you and I can figure out how to do what he did in this thing. We don't need to do that. It's the extreme, and it's an example. But it comes from what we just read here, that the foundation is breath awareness and diaphragmatic breathing. And we really, 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 really do want to continually keep exploring the flow of prana inside of ourselves, both when we're sitting up and when we're laying down. You just have to. You must insist to yourself that you become very, 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 very curious about prana. Those of you who have raised children, look at the curiosity that a 2 or 3 year old child has. That's why they cause so much trouble in the house, isn't it? Those who are parents. If you're not a parent, go ask parents. Watch little children. I think they call one of it the terrible twos, because the little children are into everything in the house. I know they manufacture and people put little clips on drawers so that the child can't figure out how to open the doors in the kitchen and open the drawers and get into trouble. But they're just insanely curious. And that curiosity of those children, we need to learn. We need to revive our early childhood curiosity and about prana. And so I know I'm saying this passionately, but please, I beg of you, do this. And again, I'm not saying this so that we can do what he did in this experiment that I haven't told you the rest of the story of. But this is a guy who became very, very much an adept with pranayama. We don't need to do that to have the direct experience of Atman, of samadhi and turiya and all that sort of stuff. These kind of advanced things gradually start to come after we do that. So first, the Western Bible says it right there. It's in the book. It says, seek first the kingdom of heaven. It's what the book says. I don't mean that to be a preacher. I'm not. I'm saying that yoga is all over the place, and it's a yogic principle. So later these kind of things come. We do not have to do this anyway. They asked him if he could stop his heart from beating. So he said, sure, I'll show you tomorrow. So the next day they hooked him up to all the machines. He's laying there. He's not exercising. He's not on a treadmill or what's that other thing? Not a treadmill, and an aerobics machine. I've forgotten what you call it. You know, the thing like this that your feet are going to your legs and you're pulling the little handles there. Somebody type it in if you remember what that machine is. It's not one of those machines. You're not doing that to cause your heart rate to go up. What he did is he raised his heart rate up to 300 beats per minute. And when a heart starts beating up anywhere near over 150, up from 150 up to 200, you're an elliptical. Thank you, Matish. Yes, an elliptical machine. That's what I was thinking. So we may have to get on an elliptical machine and just work till we're almost ready to fall over with a heart attack, to get our heart to go up that high. But nobody can go up to 300. And well, he took his heart up to 300 beats per minute. And at the rate of 300 beats per minute, the heart is just vibrating. It's fibrillating. They call fibrillating. The heart is just sitting there vibrating, and it's not actually pumping any blood. And he did that for 17 seconds. And the researchers, the doctors and researchers that were doing this, they freaked out. They thought they had this man laying on their table in their thing, and shit, he's dying. They thought he was dying. And so they started panicking. And he just stopped and said basically something like, "What's wrong? You asked me to stop the heart." They thought he was going to stop the heart by slowing it down, just deeply relaxing. This is the way most of us think we're going to do. We're just going to deeply, deeply relax. And he went the other direction. He didn't say, do it. They didn't ask him, will you do it this way? They said, will you do it? He said, yes, I'll show you. So he showed them in this way. I observed this thing happen. This was in the fall of 1994. Was it 95? This was in Rishikesh in India. And it was fall of 95. I was living in the ashram in Rishikesh. And Rajmani, the pundit who was from Indian fellow, but he lives in US, runs the institute there now. He brought a group of something like 50 or 60, or maybe it was 80. It was a huge number of Americans to come to India. And at the time, there was some political strife going on in the state government where Rishikesh was located. And there were people fighting. And some people had actually been killed. It was pretty nasty. And the government called what they called a chakra bond. A chakra is a wheel, we know, but the word chakra means wheel. And everything was under lockdown. So Rajmani brought all these students. They're sitting in the hotel, and all of a sudden there was a lockdown, and nothing with a wheel could move. Even a bicycle was not permitted to move because it had a wheel. No motor scooters, no bicycles, no cars, no buses, nothing could move. The only thing, Swami Rama could still get around because he had the car, it was an ambulance. And so the police knew him. And so when he and his ambulance came by, he was still able to commute back and forth from the ashram to the hospital that he was in the process of building, and brought it back anyway. So to entertain the people who were now stranded in this hotel, Rajmani went to Swami Rama and said, I can't take these people. They were going to go up to visit temples in the mountain and do all these touristy kinds of things. And they couldn't leave the hotel. So what are we going to do? So Swami Rama agreed to come over and talk to the people. And I was there. I was not part of their program, but I was living in the ashram. They were all staying in the hotel, which is a short walk down the street, half a kilometer away or something like that. And this day, Swami Rama, I was sitting right there, and Swamiji was sitting in a chair, and he brought with him two doctors. I've forgotten exactly which two doctors it was now, but brought two doctors with him who are also his meditation students from the hospital. And he had one doctor sitting on each side of him. One was to his left and one was to his right. And he said to both doctors, and he said, now you're a doctor, right? And to all the people, yes, I'm a doctor. What kind of doctor are you? Well, I'm a doctor of whatever it was. And I think it was the cancer doctor and the neurologist. I think it was a cancer doctor and a neurologist. It doesn't matter, but he's got one on each arm, and he says, feel my pulse. Can you feel my pulse? I said, yes, they're doctors, so they're qualified to feel a pulse. And he sat there, and he said, just just sat there. And then when he was done, he said, now, what was my pulse rate? One of them said, get ready for this. You're not going to believe this. This is not possible. One of them said 20. The other one said 200. One wrist was beating at 20 and the other was beating at 200. And he said, okay, let's do it again. This is not possible. Now, he did not make a big dramatic show about it. I almost did not even notice what I was hearing. It was so unbelievable. It just sort of came in one ear and out the other. And he was not making a big deal of it. Well, this is a pranayama master, which is very rare, I think. And so I'm just dragging you through this because I know you enjoy the story. It's a fun story. But you and I do not need to attain this kind of stillness and a bit skill with prana to be able to do sushumna awakening and to have kundalini awaken and to have glimpses of samadhi and turiya and the stuff we're talking about. We do not have to have this level of skill. That kind of level of skill comes later. I still cannot do that, and I don't care. If I need to do something like that, I think that the stream of consciousness called tradition will do it internally from me, and then I'll know how to do it. But it's completely unimportant, and I'm just saying that to you because I really mean it. Anyway, so what he did is, so let's do it again. And this time, and then he says, what's my pulse? And it reversed. The one who said it was 20, he didn't say exactly 200. He said, I think it was about 160, I think was the number he said. And the other guy who last time it was 200 said, well, it's 20. And it was probably the exact same number. It's just that they couldn't count it very accurately. I'm just being humorous in saying that. So there's a lot going on with this prana business. I divert to tell you those stories just as a way of encouraging. Please, please, please. The key to pranayama is explore it within. Feel it flowing inside. When you're going to do diaphragmatic breathing, let it not be chest breathing. Let it not be abdominal breathing. Find the abdomen. Find it in your own body and learn to practice with that diaphragm. I will later. I'll go get our little statue dummy and I'll make another thing to show where the diaphragm is located. Play with it. Practice simple, gentle diaphragmatic breathing. Play with some alternate nostril breathing. Learn to, as Mitesh mentioned, using both nostrils. Easiest way to use both nostrils is put your attention there. You can feel when you hear me talk in my guided stuff, I say, feel the touch of the air moving. It's the cognitive sense of touch. You can feel the air coming in both nostrils. You can feel it going out both nostrils. And sushumna will awaken in the two nostrils, both be open and they will be balanced. And then as you breathe, whether you're sitting or laying down, you can feel the flow of the vayus. You can feel the flows like little rivers of energy moving throughout your body. Anyway, enough of my rant. I'll go back to what he was saying. The science of pranayama is intimately connected with the functions of the autonomic nervous system, and its techniques are aimed at bringing the functions of the autonomic nervous system, normally considered involuntary, under conscious control. This can be achieved by regulating the breath and, through the breath, controlling the motion of the lungs. The most vital step in controlling the heart rhythm and the vagus nerve, this big major nerve that comes down through here that runs a whole bunch of stuff down here. These in turn bring the autonomic nervous system under control. And this opens the way for experiencing the higher and subtler levels of mind. Listen to that little simple sleeping sentence there. This opens the way for experiencing the higher and subtler levels of mind. Highly accomplished yogis can also control the central nervous system so that diseases such as muscular dystrophy and Parkinson's disease can be prevented. I had the opportunity in the therapy unit at the Himalayan Institute in Pennsylvania. I had the opportunity to work with an advanced Parkinson's patient who they didn't know if it was Parkinson's. They called it Parkinson's-like. And this man and his wife had been to every clinic, Mayo Clinic and Harvard and all around the place trying to figure out what was happening with him. And and what the cause was. Nobody could find anything. Nobody could treat him. They finally went and found the people who had run this clinic where Swami Rama was making those demonstrations in 1970. The family was named Menninger. It was the Menninger Foundation. And there was a Mr. and Mrs. Menninger. And they went and found Mrs. Menninger. Mr. Menninger had left the body years before. And they found Mrs. Menninger and said, do you have any ideas? And they reminded them of this Swami named Rama. So they went to see Swami Rama's clinic in Pennsylvania. And the doctor there that I was working, he didn't know nobody knew what to do with it. I'm not claiming I did. But he said, would you work with this fella and see what you can do? And so I knew the wife. I met the fella. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life. Of course, I'm not a clinician dealing with people. But what would happen with him, and I literally had this happen, you'd have him up walking. He walked slowly, but he'd be walking and you'd be helping guide him walking. And all of a sudden he would lose complete control of his whole body and it would just become still. And he would start to fall over. And there was no nervous system response that would just before he hit the floor catch him. You know, you think like if you and I are falling just before we hit the floor, we catch ourselves and we kind of bounce off the floor. Now, I never had him fall on the floor, but I had him fall into my arms and literally there was no nervous system response at all. And all I could do was use every bit of strength I had to allow him to just lay down on the floor. You with me? He would do this, and if he was sitting up, cushions behind him in his bed, and all of a sudden he'd be there, he'd be talking, but not very clearly, and all of a sudden everything would just freeze. Everything literally would stop. And I talked to him a little bit then when he was lucid and could talk. And I said, when that happens to you, I said, I know your body is not moving, but internally, are you still aware? Or do you like fall asleep or into a coma or something? Do you disappear? Are you still aware? And he said, yes, he's still aware. But what was happening, my words for it, he was having an extreme pratyahara. He couldn't think linearly, 1 + 1 = 2. He couldn't do that kind of thinking. He couldn't form words. He couldn't move his lips. He couldn't do anything. But as we talked, he became aware. He was still aware. And later, when I asked him this, he was able to tell me that, yes, I was alert. I was aware, but he couldn't think. It's a little bit like what we're trying to do experientially with Yoga Nidra. So we talked about how to find prana mentally. This was just an amateur experiment that I was given the go-ahead, work with this guy as best you can, see if you can, because there was no solution. Nobody in the medical institutions of the world could figure out what was wrong with him. He had occasion in his career he was a diplomat for the government and had been on assignments in many of the consulates, embassies around the world. And one of the speculations is that he had, by spies, been given heavy metal poisoning, but nobody ever knew. That there just was no idea what was going on. Well, the funny thing was happening. Since he was aware, I was trying to get this man to become aware of prana. And I said, I'm just guessing. I said, I have no idea what I'm talking about. But if what the yogis are telling us is true, there ought to be some possibility that from the deepest level of your Atman, of your consciousness, you ought to be able to grab a hold of this prana and cause something to happen. And eventually what happened, he was with us for, several weeks. And I think it was about 2 days later, his wife said to me, this is unbelievable. He did this lock-up thing. And in about 2 minutes later, he came back. And usually it would take several hours before he would come back to life. And he started to gain some mastery over being able to switch back on the nervous system. I don't know why I'm telling you that story. And I don't know if I want to leave this because it's just something that I observed happening. And then I don't know whatever happened with him in the course of the rest of his life. He was pretty old at the time, and I don't know how many years he had left in front of him to play with this. But it was one of those little glimpses of this stuff that I had with working with somebody else. And I watched the magic of this man be able to have this thing where everything would froze and he would just fall over. And then internally, he was still alive. And the life force was there, the prana was there, and he was gradually learning how to switch that prana back on and get it to operate through the central nervous system and the autonomic nervous system and bring himself back. And then he would open his eye. I mean, his eyes weren't even closed. I said open the eyes. But when he would freeze, he would just freeze completely like this. And then he would, look up at you, or he'd look at his wife, and he would be back. It was a fascinating, fascinating thing. I diverted here because highly accomplished yogis can also control the central nervous system so that diseases such as muscular dystrophy and Parkinson's disease can be prevented. In other words, by regulating the breath, the various vehicles responsible for conducting their respective duties in our body are regulated. Good health is provided, and the student is led to subtler levels of awareness. The ancient, and this is not coming from doing strange physical, breathing practices that you go to workshops to learn how to do breath retention sorts of things. It's from awareness. The ancient manuals of yoga science describe in detail the internal structure of the human body and its functions. And even though ancient yogis did not dissect the human body, their description of the nervous system is consistent with that of modern physiology. There is, however, one major difference between the ancient descriptions and the modern ones. The description of the human body given by the ancient yogis does not refer directly to the physical details of the nervous system, but to subtler counterparts of these physical details. The subtler counterparts of the physical. Let me see what Roseanne put. There's a very nice and useful picture of vagus nerve, lung, and heart at Summary of Practices course at Udemy. There is? Oh my, who must have put that there? I had forgotten that we put that there. I'll have to go look at that course again. Thank you for the reminder, Roseanne. Yeah, I remember we put some pictures there. But to subtler counterparts of these physical details, their descriptions, the yogis speak of nadis or energy channels and pranas or vital energies that are consistent with details of nerves and nerve impulses respectively. Little footnote here, nadis. We think commonly when you read about nadis, we think of nadis as being like pipes through which energy flows. You with me? The nadi is the channel. It's often translated as nadis are channels, and energy flows in the channels. A physical nerve is a physical thing, and physical electricity flows in that. But the nadi itself is subtler than all of this, so it's not really that there is a pipe. With me, pipe, P-I-P-E. It's not that there is a something just happened. Hello. Hello. Something just glitched here. Would somebody, if you can still hear me, would you please type in the box that I'm still here? I don't know if something happened. I'm going over here. If you can still hear me, it looked like this thing disconnected somehow. Still hear me? It looked like this thing disconnected somehow. Oh, okay. No, I just checked over here and it's still working. I've got to turn this volume down here. I went over and looked and it's still, something happened here. It gave me the appearance. it gave me the appearance that the meeting was disconnected. You disappeared it disappeared for a moment. Thank you, Rosalind. Matri says your camera went away. I don't know what happened here. I don't remember ever seeing that happen before, but then I went, and so it's still working. Anyway, what was I starting to say? Oh, nadis. Most of us get the idea because the translation says nadis gets translated as channels, and it's like there's a little pipe. This is just the end of a pen, but we think, oh, well, so there's a little pipe, and like a water pipe, and water flows through the pipe, that there's a nadi that's like that. Well, it's actually different from that. The flow of the energy creates the appearance of there being a pipe, if that makes sense. And so then we speak of it as a nadi. You don't need to do anything with that. I'm just commenting to you just as a matter of intrigue, that we're not actually looking for a pipe. Their descriptions speak of nadi or energy channels. We're stuck with language, and pranas or vital energies, and are consistent with the details of nerves and nerve impulses respectively. In other words, physical nerves and impulses are gross manifestations of the subtler nadis and pranas that were known to the ancient yogis. These are not known to the modern scientists, so in their opinion, this does not exist. There's no such thing as prana. And there's a man named Rupert Sheldrake, who is a scientist. If you ever read something interesting, read a book called Science Set Free, published in the US, or The Science Delusion, published in the UK. And this is one of the things that Rupert talks about, that in the 1700s, the scientific community of the time decided that there is no such thing as what at the time was called vital energy. And that was an English terminology for the yogic term prana. They decided it doesn't exist. And that phenomenon, that belief system has existed up till today. So modern science mostly, I'm not saying that there's no exceptions to this, there are, but those scientists who are exceptions to this are in a minority, and they cannot be terribly outspoken. They'll get in trouble with their careers and their universities and all like that. But anyway, so nadis. Similarly, physical plexuses and gland centers are gross manifestations of the chakras or spiritual centers described by the yogis. So it's not that I have a nervous system with nadis inside of it. It's not that I have a physical body and inside of my physical body I have something called chakras. So we think of, oh, here's my chakra inside of my chest. Here's my chakra down here in my belly. Here's my chakra here. It's the other way around. The prana is there, and manifesting out of the prana is the physical body. I know that I'm saying this with some passion, but I'm trying to make the point here in what we're looking at here that Swami Rama just says very simply. Physical nerves and impulses are gross manifestations of the subtler nadis and pranas that were known to the ancient yogis. How do we get that to be known to us? This is what I'm kind of begging you. Please snoop around inside. Do the basic diaphragmatic breathing, but sitting or lying down, observe internally, feel the flow of the energy, and gradually this is how we find the prana. Let us consider briefly the description given in ancient yoga manuals. There are several thousand nadis. Let me see what this need to go. Okay. Bye-bye, Roseanne. Maybe if this is of interest or curious, check it later. Okay. See you later. There are several thousand nadis, of which the three main ones are, you all know this, Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. Sushumna is centrally located and passes through the Marudanda, which corresponds to the physical spinal column. It corresponds to the physical spinal column, but it's subtler. It originates at the Muladhara chakra. which corresponds to the pelvic plexus of the sympathetic system. So it's not that there is a Muladhara chakra down in the base and it's contained inside of my physical spine. The chakra is the original, and the physical body is the manifestation. Our perception of reality is backwards. We look at a chakra manual or read a book and we think, oh, here I am, this is me, and I have chakras in me, and I have a chakra here, and I have a chakra here, and I have a chakra here, but we've got it backwards. It's the other way around. It originates at Muladhara. As it passes through the Merudanda, it pierces the Svadhisthana chakra. So this energy moving up from the first chakra pierces the second chakra. The Manipura chakra pierces that, corresponding to the solar plexus. The Anahata chakra corresponding to the cardiac plexus. The Vishuddha chakra corresponding to the pharyngeal plexus. I can't even pronounce the word, the anatomical word. The Sushumna then pierces the Talu, corresponding to the base of the skull, and then divides into an anterior and a posterior proportion. That's where we experience, when we experience here, this is the posterior. When we experience back here, this is the anterior. The anterior portion, and I've got it backwards. The anterior portion goes towards the Ajna chakra and joints in the Brahma Randra, or the cavity of Brahma. The posterior portion of the Sushumna passes from behind the skull and joins the Brahma Randra up here. So the one goes this way and joins at Brahma Randra. This one goes this way and joins at Brahma Randra. It is this posterior portion that is developed through pranayama, and the realized yogi liberates his soul through the Brahmarandha. So in meditation, when you see a person sees light at the end of the tunnel, that's here. It goes upwards into the Brahmananda. When we're laying on our back and we're practicing, pretending that we're breathing prana, inhaling up to the crown of the head with soul and exhaling down with hum, or up with om and down with om. When we're laying on our back doing that, it's just the anterior is here, the posterior branches there, but they both end up back at the Brahmarandha, the cavity up there, the place of freedom or something like that. The posterior portion of the Sushumna passes from behind the skull and joins the Brahmarandha. In this posterior portion that is developed through pranayama, the realized yogis liberates his soul through the Brahmarandha. And this is it. All of this that we're doing in our life is about self-realization now in our life. But also, as a bonus, if you and I have the good fortune to be conscious at the time of death, if we know death is coming and we get to leave as yogis, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to leave by departing the body through the Brahmarandha. Takes us to Turiya. The Ida and Pingala are on the left and right side, respectively, of the Merudanda, the central stream. They also originate in the Muladhara chakra, and the two nadis cross each other before they end at the nostrils. The Ida ends in the left nostril and Pingala in the right nostril. So when we're doing this simple, basic beginning practice of breath awareness at the nostrils, guess what, my dear friends? If we understand this, that beginning practice is actually also the advanced practice, because this is why when you put your attention there, it brings the whole thing into a balance. It brings an alignment from left and right. So it's go there and be aware. There are detailed descriptions in yogic manuals of the chakras, which are centers of pranic energy and which are represented as lotuses. Each chakra has a certain number of petals, a certain color, a presiding deity, and deity does not mean a being like a man in the sky. It's the consciousness that's going on there. And we think of that as a being. And so on, associated with this. In the lowest center of the Muladhara chakra is the sleeping serpent-like fire Kundalini, which represents all the latent potential in man. It is the aim of yoga to arouse the sleeping kundalini and lead it upwards through the sushumna, piercing the different chakras to the Sahasrara chakra, the 1,000-petal lotus on the top of the head. This represents the union of the cosmic potency or Shakti with cosmic consciousness or Shiva. Shiva and Shakti never were separate, but they appear to be separate. So we're retracing Shakti back to Shiva. This is a misunderstanding of the Western Old Testament Bible that talks about, the rib of man. It talks about Adam and Eve, and Adam and woman is merely a rib taken out of man. It gets misunderstood, and women are inferior to men. It's completely a misunderstanding of a yogic principle. The beauty is actually the other way around. Look in nature. Which side of nature creates more life? It's the feminine. There are no, as Johnny just said, there are no dichotomies. There are no dichotomies, but there is the appearance of dichotomy. And so in that appearance of dichotomy, Shiva and Shakti are actually one and the same. But we manifest outward because of Shakti. That potency is Shakti, the feminine. So what we're doing is we're retracing that energy, that prana, all the way back to where it came from. And then you end up with this sentence that says this represents the union of cosmic potency or Shakti with the cosmic consciousness or Shiva. And so it means we're tracing the Shakti back to where she is one with him before they appeared to be subdivided. Through this final union, the yogi achieves realization and liberation from all bondage. He thus merges his soul or Atman with the cosmic soul, Brahma. Pranayama practices are the means to this awakening. They aim at devitalizing the Ida and Pingala and allow the prana or vital energy to flow through the Sushumna. The yogi then experiences unique joy and is freed from the bondage of time. In the human body, the cosmic force prana was recognized by the ancients and subdivided on the basis of the 10 functions it performs. And it is through the manifestation of these pranas or vital energies in the body that all bodily functions are possible and can be coordinated. These are the vehicles that transport and supply the different organs of the body with the cosmic energy. Of the 10 pranas, there are 5 main pranas. Udana, and they're called Vayus actually. Udana, Prana, Samana, Apana, and Vyana. Udana Vayu, Prana Vaya, Samana Vaya, Apana Vaya, Vyana Vaya. I've written about that in summaries on my website. It's discussed in some of the Udemy courses that we made, but it's a way to keep it very simple here. And then he describes where these are. I think I'm inclined here to not go through these right now. If you want to make this complicated, you can go buy a copy of this book and read the forthcoming complicated practices. I'm going to pause here. You're welcome to do that, do whatever you want to do. But note elsewhere, I'm not going to give you a place to go reference but if you have been hanging out with what we keep reviewing over and over and over again, and if you have the curiosity and the willingness to invest about 50 hours of your time, go through our YouTube channel and watch all the video lectures of Swami Rama, and you will see that he is telling us in there, I am trying to give you not the shortcut in the way of beating the system, but the direct route. Taking all this is coming out of a prana master that says all of these complicated breathing practices comes down to simplicity, and I'm trying to tell you the simple way to do this. And it has to do with this up and down the spine business and finding the prana and just being aware of these 5 vayus. This is the core. I don't want to start a fight with anybody out there, so I hope I almost paused to say this. But when Paramahansa Yogananda came to the West and started teaching, what he's teaching came to be known as Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga is in the Yoga Sutras, but they like to say, no, that's a different usage of the word. But the core of that practice is this simple Sushumna breathing practice. And then they too have gotten it complicated, and you have to join their organization and all this. But Yogananda's guru's guru was the same Babaji as Swami Rama's guru's, Bengali Baba's guru was the same Babaji. It's like first cousins in terms of the tree of lineages. And the only reason I'm mentioning that is there was another effort of another modern sage in the name of Swami Yogananda Giri, known as Paramahansa Yogananda, who was trying to impart upon people that all of this complexity that we keep doing with chakras and all of these breathing things that are advanced, physically difficult to do, and attempting to do this long breath retention, all of this is summarized in the simplicity of breathing up and down the spine mentally with so and hum or om and om, and being, as I said earlier, like the child. Watch a small child and look at their curiosity when they're 2 or 3 years old. They're into everything. And learn from that child. Set aside all of your adult hang-ups about your emotional problems and your job and your marriage and your parents and all of this crap. It's just noise on the surface level, and spend some time finding the prana within. That's where it's to be found. And so then I'm not going to go through the rest of this with you. And so the next chapter, next time I do this, is about concentration. Then there's one on meditation, and there's one on samadhi. But I would invite you to remember that what we talked about before last time on asana had to do not with the modern version of asana gymnastic yoga studios, but has to do with a steady, stable posture so that we can do this internal exploration. And this on pranayama has to do, the core thing, the bottom line, so to speak, is Sushumna, is having the balance of the left and right nostrils. And you notice for yourself, most of you have experienced this. Some of you are pretty good at doing it regularly, that when Sushumna is balanced and the 2 nostrils are flowing freely, it's very easy to go inside. Very easy to go inside and leave that noisy world out there. And while we're in there, snoop around. Please snoop around. Follow the flow of the prana, not because the book tells you to do it, but because you're a child. You have the curiosity of the small child, and that you're snooping around in there. And it helps us discover that none of this surface level stuff is actually me. I am Atman. I am Purusha. I am Brahman. I am Shiva. I am Shakti. I am God. I am divine. I am the light. And all of that kind of stuff. Find the prana, please. Okay? Thank you for hanging out and allowing me to sort of go off into storytelling and rants about this. I was kind of pondering before this how to approach this pranayama thing here and make it fun and interesting and maybe a little bit motivating in some way. Okay, a child is unafraid. Yes, that's very well said, Rosalind. The child is unafraid. And remember, remind me of another story. When Swami Rama was leaving India, when the boss threw him out of the mountains and told him, go out and teach fools, he said to him, what do you want me to teach them? Our religions? And he said, he was younger then, he said, no, you foolish boy. First teach them about fear. First teach them about fear. Like Raj just said, a child is unafraid. And so, of course, we have some fear. When you start snooping around inside, of course, fear naturally comes, but keep going anyway. Be a child and be curious. Focus on the curiosity. Notice when you're curious about something, sometimes you stub your toe and it hurts. you're off climbing a mountain, you're out in the forest, and all of a sudden you trip over a rock and you hurt your toe. But do you give up? No, you just you brush it off and you rub your toe a little bit and you keep going. Play. Yes, thank you, Ma. Play. Thank you for playing, Matesh. Let's let Ma Trees play be the last word on this thing. I like it. Big, all uppercase Play, play, exclamation points. Play. Play in the ocean of prana. Play in the ocean of prana. And between where we are out here and the physical body, between there and the silence after the Om, where is the Turiya and the Atman and the Purusha, all of this is the play of the prana. This is the play of the prana. So just find the prana and play in it, swim in it, okay? Hi, Nellie. My toes have healed, Roz says. Good. I'm glad your toes have healed. Wonderful. Enjoy your play with prana, everybody, okay? So bye-bye. See you later. And dewey, borrowing from our friends the Dutchies, means bye-bye, which means, I know it really means Om Tat Sat. Om Tat Sat, okay? Dewey.